Now in this video, video 5, I would like to cover some in-depth investigation that I've actually done around the situation with Garry Poole, culture, and all of the pointers that were pointing, in my view, very clearly to a situation where Garry Poole was barely coping with his position as CEO at Tauranga City Council. Now, to kick this off, I've mentioned this in video 2, I think it is, that I did. There's an article by Matt Shand which is dated the 30th of June 2019, in which it is identified that Garry Poole was incompetent in relation to computer systems. He couldn't use emails. He basically used PAs for purposes beyond their job description, as I think was stated by Leanne Brown or Calvin Cloud. And this information was known to me from feedback from staff very early on in Garry's Garry Poole's term. Now, this information in the newspaper article also points to other issues with regard to the sheer number of PAs that have turned over, and also Marty Greenfell talks about a number of phone calls he's received, which really, in summary, in my view, point to a CEO that was struggling to keep the council functioning, let alone moving forward in any way. Despite that though, Garry Poole, as you saw in, I think it might have been video 1, where John Robson was speaking, it's quite clear that Garry Poole had the aspiration that Tauranga was going to become an internationally competitive city. Now, with all of that information and the Human Synergistics report, which is partly covered in video 4, there was so many pointers about how hopeless Garry Poole was. One has to ask the question, why did councillors, who are the only body who can do anything about the CEO, and he's the only person that the councillors employ, why did they take so long to do anything? Garry Poole ran his whole 5-year contract before anything was done with his replacement. And the issue, I think, which is a large part of this, is the fact, going back to 2013, how difficult it was to actually recruit a CEO. Now, while I don't have details of that, a number of councillors have pointed out that that was a very trying time, and my belief was that a number of applicants more than likely were ticked by the councillors as being acceptable, and when discussions occurred either with councillors or with perhaps senior management, they changed their mind. In my view, they were the CEOs who were wise people, and what we ended up with was Garry Poole. Now, Garry Poole, based on my own discussions with people at Wellington City Council, was somebody that they were delighted to get rid of. And the reason I know that is, as part of the investigations I made, I rang a number of people at Wellington City Council, just cold called them, and approximately 50% of them were interested in responding out of about 12 that I contacted. And of those 6 people who responded, there was nothing nice to say about Garry Poole, nothing nice at all. The other 6 people were deathly scared of Garry Poole and didn't want to respond. So you've got an overwhelming pile of information there, and yet the councillors have done nothing. Both the 2013 elected councillors and the 2016 elected councillors have done nothing to correct the situation any sooner. So what I can say in terms of talking to councillors who did respond when I phoned them was that there seems to be a real apathy around the desire to do anything with Garry Poole. And in one case, one councillor sort of said they just wanted to move on and learn from the the whole situation. When I sort of thought about that afterwards, I really asked myself, what is it that they've actually learned? And I couldn't actually, from that conversation, figure out what it was that was learned that would avoid this situation again. So there really is an apathy, and I think an apathy amongst the councillors, whereby these issues perhaps weren't affecting them directly, because at the end of the day they just go to meetings with Garry Poole and talk and make decisions. It wasn't directly affecting them, and they really didn't, I guess, have an interest in getting rid of him because of the difficulty of securing a CEO in 2013. Just to wrap this up, I'm going to cover off a couple of documents I've received through Lagoima requests, and those Lagoima requests are centred around two things: the general nature of the recruitment process in 2013, and the second part is getting more up-to-date figures from Human Synergistics in terms of what the council culture and other factors are currently like. It's not good reading, but we'll now have a look at what I've received from the council. So what we've got here is a recent Lagoima response, which is just around the recruitment process in 2013. And what you'll see here is that we actually had 60 applicants. After the recruitment company had vetted them, we got down to 11. That then dropped down to 5 after the first interview that councillors had with candidates, and then dropped down to 3 ultimately for the second interview. So of those 3, we can see that what would have been, I suspect, the most preferred candidate in fact withdrew his or her offer, and the information I have is that they, whoever they were, met with either councillors or staff and essentially said thanks but no thanks. So what we then have is 2 left, and it would appear to me that for whatever reason those 2 that were left perhaps didn't get appointed, and I'm guessing that Garry Poole may have came along and had never been on the shortlist, and that was as a result of Wellington City Council not renewing his contract. And as I have said previously in this video, there was a reason for that based on what I had heard from staff at Wellington City Council that I'd contacted. The next thing I want to just have a look at here is just recap a couple of things before we look at the 2017 Human Synergistic report that I've also just recently received. This here is the preferred culture that the executive leadership team, which comprises the group managers or general managers as they're now known below the CEO, wanted, along with the CEO and councillors. So you can see the majority of the operation of the council in this area here. What we see is this is what they want, but this is what they get, which I've mentioned in previous videos. The smallest area is in fact the one they want to be largest, so it doesn't look good, and this is all part of the culture which is identified back in 2013 and 15. Now what you'll see here is a couple of things I'm just going to cover off, which just points to the I guess difference between what management considered was wonderful and what staff did. So what we've got here is 2 documents, and up here we have 407 responses, so that's presumably the staff. And over here we have the executive leadership team, which, as I've said, is the staff who report to the CEO, and there's 7 of them who were involved in the survey. What I'm just going to point out here is a couple of things. You'll see here we've actually got for total influence, we have in 2013 a very high total influence from the executive leadership team, dropping down. And what we'll see here is, in terms of staff, what they perceived as their total influence in 2013 has also dropped down. So there's a real tendency here for only the executive leadership team, who were largely all new in 2013 as a result of the Lee Orton restructure, running the show, which was part of the problem. We also have, if we have a look here, fairness of appraisals, which is a really good one to sort of gauge how staff perceived the management above them. And what you'll see here is that from the executive leadership team, there's a little bit of variation from those 2 years, but they largely think everything is wonderful. If we come over here, staff think quite otherwise. So a dichotomy in both these cases between what is the enablement at the staff level and also the fairness that the staff perceive from the management above them that largely came in 2013. We also have here customer service, and this is another good one. The executive leadership team think it's just actually becoming more and more wonderful. The blue represents, I think it's 2013, and the brown represents 2015, whereas over here at the coalface, the very same rating from staff is shit. So all of these things are things which were available in the Human Synergistics report, which point to the dichotomy in terms of different viewpoints. Now, the reason that this is important to understand is that by and large, the entities that are sitting in council meetings is this crowd, the executive leadership team. And the reason that this is important is this is flagging the very separation between that group of people who talk to the CEO and life is generally wonderful, as you can see here, and the staff who have a completely different opinion. And this was all available, and it just required councillors in particular to understand some of these facets of how to interpret this and actually do something about the situation. Now, what we have next is the Tauranga survey results from 2016 to 2019, and what appears to have happened here is that the council only does these every couple of years. So we'll just have a look at what we've got here. So 2017, the actual performance, and you'll see here once again the area that we want to be biggest. I mean, honestly, that is getting smaller and smaller as far as I can see. And the two main situations you have here with the way the council operates is avoidance, which is what I see with councillors when they're asked the hard questions. They just hang up and don't want to answer the questions. And the secondary style is oppositional, neither of which the organisation wants. And here we actually have a nice little summary basically over Garry Poole's tenure. And what you can see if you look at 2013 to 2017, this area here, the most important area, it's just shrinking. It's already bloody small as it is, and it's just getting smaller. And I think this just puts the enormity of the situation that has developed over what has been 5 years of Garry Poole running the organisation, with councillors nodding to everything that Garry Poole suggests, and a situation where 2 trienniums of councillors have failed to address significant organisational issues.